Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Elizabeth. Hope you're well over there.
Doing quite well.
Great. We've got a lot to cover today, and we've got a really action-packed, exciting topic to discuss today, and something dear to my heart. So we'll be covering crypto regulations and governance in Hong Kong, the future of crypto with regulatory and in Hong Kong, and then finally, women in crypto. So without further ado, Elizabeth, congratulations on being the head of the FinTech division at the SFC. The SFC is actually one of the first few regulators which started to look into this space and introduced a very comprehensive regulatory framework. Can you tell us what was the SFC's thinking behind this? And is the SFC concerned that the early regulatory intervention may be seen as just being too early or stifling? Could you let us know what you think about that?
Right. First, I'd like to thank you very much, and also Jessica for inviting me to today's event. Now, back to your question. You are very correct to say that the SFC was in fact one of the first financial regulators which started to regulate the virtual asset space. Now, back in 2017, we took a very hard look at the industry and at the developments of the industry. And we had a choice of deciding whether we should regulate or not. So for example, some jurisdictions decided that they would actually ban crypto activities outright. Many jurisdictions adopted a wait and see approach. So they would see how the industry developed and decide whether and how to regulate. Other jurisdictions adopted a light touch approach. So for example, they only regulate virtual asset activities from an anti-money laundering or a payments perspective. And there are some jurisdictions that regulate from a full regulatory approach. So we were faced with many different choices that we could make. And we were actually in a very difficult place when we were making this decision, because back then there was absolutely no international consensus. So regulators around the world didn't know whether we should be regulating virtual asset activities. And if we really decided to regulate them, then how they should be regulated. So, and another major hurdle that the SFC faced, and also many regulators around the world as well, is that the SFC's remit only covers securities and futures contracts. So as most of you know, that virtual assets, the bulk of them are not actually securities or futures contracts. So we had a very difficult decision to make as to how we could actually step in if we decided to regulate. So we looked at the industry, and we saw a lot of investor protection issues. For example, market manipulation was quite rampant. There could be conflicts of interest. For example, for virtual asset exchanges, the exchange itself probably could deal against their own clients on the platform. So that was a major conflict of interest that we identified. There were also a lot of safe custody of assets issues, a lot of hacking, and maybe even misappropriation of client assets. So we thought that it looked like the industry was here to stay. So then we decided that we couldn't just do nothing. And we decided to step in and actually introduce a very comprehensive regime to regulate the industry. Now, although our regime seems to be quite stringent, and we were really one of the first regulators to introduce such a comprehensive and stringent regime, our view was that we're not actually stifling innovation, we're not stifling market development. We firmly believe that clear regulatory guidance, clear regulatory clarity, and robust requirements would actually help the industry to develop in a healthy manner, and would also tell the industry the boundaries that we expect them in terms of conduct that they should actually be complying with. So if you ask me, it's been quite a few years already now since that we've decided to step into the space. I still think that we did make a right decision to go all out and to regulate the space. And I'm happy to note that actually regulators now around the world, those who may have actually introduced a light touch regime to regulate from an anti-money laundering perspective, or maybe from a payments perspective, are now also looking into how they could regulate it more from a investor protection angle. So I'm sure you would agree, Angelina, since you used to be a regulator yourself. So actually, I think it must have been a very different experience for you to join the crypto world. And I understand when you joined it, it was still in its infancy. So how has your experience been so far?
It's been fascinating, and thanks for the question, Elizabeth. I joined, or I got involved in it in 2013. And as a ex-regulator, as a market participant, as a person in operations and compliance, it's the virtual assets industry is fascinating, and it's in such nascency that all you can do is help the industry grow. And that's what's so exciting about it. And I thought with my skills, I would be able to help companies properly comply with SFC rules and properly apply the best practice internal control guidelines, management supervision guidelines, and help firms grow, as well as the entire industry, to make digital assets a real investment asset class that is here to stay and will have longevity, and make it interesting for investors. This has been the most interesting investment class that has come up in probably since securities were introduced and invented. So I think you and I are on the cusp of a really, really exciting time, and we're right in the middle of it. Me helping companies and you actually setting out these new rules that'll actually bring Hong Kong to the next space. So it's been very exciting for me, and I can only see more and more growth in this area, even though there's a slight crypto winter, and we've seen securities winters too. So we just need to get through this. If you have proper risk management measures in place, you've got proper diversification and controls in place, you will weather this and you will do well. And the next group that you'll be licensing will be doing really, really well. So I have a question for you, getting back to the difficult stuff. Can you give the audience a brief overview of what the SFC's regulations are for virtual assets, or what I call digital assets, and for the virtual asset activities?
Sure. As I mentioned before, fundamentally, the SFC does not have regulatory remit over virtual assets, which are not securities. So what we did and what we're doing continuously is to identify activities that are most prevalent in Hong Kong, that interface with the public the most. And we have to look at our existing powers and how we can actually stretch them and extend them so that we can actually regulate non-securities activities. So the first activity that we identified was the operation of virtual asset exchanges. So back in 2019, we introduced an opt-in regime to regulate these exchanges. Now, what do we mean by an opt-in regime? It's a regime for virtual asset exchanges which want to get our license and which generally probably only trade in non-security virtual assets. But since they want to get our license, we require them to trade at least one security token. So once they start trading one security token on the platform, then it means that they are conducting activities in securities, which fall within the SFC's traditional regulatory remit. So once they do this, then we would be able to actually license them for types 1 and type 7 in order for them to operate the virtual asset exchange. So once we are able to license them, then we impose requirements governing their activities on their license as licensing conditions. And these and we've designed these requirements based on the same business, same risk, and same rules principle. So what this means is that we regulate virtual asset exchanges just like we would regulate securities brokers and automated trading venues. So these the requirements that we impose are actually borrowed from these from our existing requirements, and we regulate from using requirements such as safe custody of client asset requirements. We impose anti-money laundering requirements, know your client, market surveillance, and this is more specific for virtual assets. We impose criteria for admission of virtual assets for trading. We also require cybersecurity, and we require the exchange to resolve conflicts of interest. So as you can see, these requirements are really what you would expect in the traditional finance world as well. So the second type of activity that we identified was the management of virtual asset funds. Now, again, we also apply the same business, same risk, same rules approach. So fund managers, which manage virtual asset funds, will be required to comply with existing regulatory requirements, for example, the Fund Manager Code of Conduct. But we will adapt these requirements to address specific risks associated with virtual assets. So if a fund manager intends to invest more than 10% of its fund into virtual assets, then they will need to come and notify us, and we will impose these requirements. Again, we impose them on the license as licensing conditions, and the requirements would cover areas such as safe custody of assets, portfolio evaluation, risk management, and the appointment of auditors. Now, the third type of activity that we have identified that the public would like to interface with virtual assets is actually through our intermediaries. So earlier this year, we issued a joint circular with the HKMA so that we could provide comprehensive guidance to our intermediaries on how they could provide virtual assets services. Now, that circular makes it very clear that intermediaries can engage in certain virtual asset activities as long as they observe specific regulatory requirements that we impose on them. For example, we make it clear now that intermediaries can provide dealing services directly in virtual assets, but they have to do this through an omnibus account arrangement with an SFC licensed virtual asset exchange. And again, we will impose specific requirements on the license. Another service that intermediaries can provide is to distribute virtual asset related products to their clients. And under the same business, same risk, same rules, they need to comply with existing requirements, including the existing complex product regime and certain additional measures, for example, testing the knowledge of clients of whether they actually understand virtual assets. And there is a slight relaxation that we provided through the circular, is that for a limited suite of exchange traded derivative products, we do not impose a professional investor restriction to the distribution of these products. So this means that these products can actually be bought by retail investors in Hong Kong. So we believe that through our comprehensive regime so far, we have broadly covered all activities through which the public is currently interfacing with the virtual asset space. And obviously we will continue to monitor the space and to review our requirements. And we may expand our scope of regulation if it's necessary. So I think that's enough talking about this rather technical aspect of our regulations. Angelina, how would you say the regulatory environment in Hong Kong for the crypto world would compare with other jurisdictions?
I think Hong Kong has all of the necessary ingredients. It has a clear regime. It has a clear regulator. We have a fabulous tax structure, basically low taxes. We've got great people that are skilled in terms of financial services. And we've got all the lawyers, accountants, and professional staff that you could possibly want for. So this is one of the most amazing places on earth to actually start a digital asset firm or actually offer these services to professional investors and investors all over the world. The thing that I think other markets have sort of done a little bit better is marketing. And now what we're seeing is some of that marketing may have been too positive, and we're seeing people come back to Hong Kong and want to set up licenses here because it's clear what the licensing regime is or will be, which you're going to talk about in a second. And it's also fair and without favor. And I think a lot of different market participants would do well to at least look into what you have just said, because it's very, very clear. The other thing is, as we discussed, enforcement, as well as getting companies to do the right thing and follow the codes of conduct. These codes of conduct, the internal control guidelines, were put there when I was a regulator for a reason, and it's to run a company properly. And we wouldn't have had so many of these problems that you're seeing now come up during this crypto winter had people put in risk management measures, diversification, and proper internal controls. So I think it would do well for all of the industries, securities, financial services, and digital assets, to really take a look at what the SFC has to offer. So I'm actually quite excited that now, with the SFC adding to its powers, which you'll be talking about, there will be even more of a clear regime. And as the SFC issues more guidance to help and does enforcement, as we have talked about, the market will continue to grow and evolve into a lasting asset class. So I'm really, really excited, because this is what I want to see survive and grow as a digital asset financial center. So I think we have all the necessary ingredients. I just need you to market more.
I'm trying hard.
You need to do more marketing. Okay. So I have a question for you before we get to the next topic. Let's talk about non-fungible tokens, or what we talk about NFTs. This is a really, really hot area. And as I've always said, these non-fungible tokens can represent art or other things, and they're very much a subjective asset class. So in the past year, there's been a lot of hype. You've heard about boring apes. You've heard about pixelated, young-looking, gangster-looking kids. And you've heard about all different NFTs around the world. How does the SFC view these NFTs, or non-fungible tokens? Are they regulated by the SFC? Is there any plans to regulate them? And what should investors think about if they are going to invest in an NFT?
Yes, thank you. Yes, we've noticed a lot of hype in the past year over NFTs. It does seem like the ICOs of 2021. So we did monitor, we still continue to monitor, and I have to say the bulk of them are, they do seem to be genuine digital representations of collectibles, of artwork. So as with artwork generally, the SFC does not actually regulate such things. But then there are still a lot of issues surrounding, like the sale of NFTs, the hype that is built up, so that the prices are really quite expensive. So we noted these issues. So we actually recently issued a press release to remind investors of the risks of NFTs, although generally we don't actually regulate NFTs. So we explained that the secondary markets of NFTs may be liquid and volatile. And again, with other virtual assets, and if investors are exposed to hacking and fraud risk as well. So investors should only invest if they are able to bear the potential losses. Now, however, as we are monitoring this space, we also noticed recent developments whereby the NFT space has slowly crossed the boundary from being a genuine collectible to actually becoming a financial asset. So for example, we've seen fractionalized NFTs, or even not fungible NFTs in the space. So once this line is crossed into the financial asset space, then our securities laws will start to apply. So if those NFTs are in fact actually packaged so that they have features of the securities, or in particular are actually collective investment schemes, then the full SFC regulatory remit would start to apply. So in that press release, we also reminded the industry to ensure that they keep their NFTs as genuine digital representations of collectibles, or if they really decide to cross that boundary into the financial asset space, then they need to be prepared that the SFC will be looking at their activities. So that was one of the signals that we sent out through the press release, and the other was to warn investors that there are quite a lot of risks associated with NFTs.
So basically the rule of the thumb is if it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, then it usually is a duck. So if it looks like a financial services product, it usually probably is. And investors should seek legal advice if they're getting into this type of NFT product that looks like a financial services product.
Yeah, that's correct.
So that guidance, I think, is very, very helpful. And I think there's some things in store for the market, which will actually solve a lot of the issues that you brought up in the beginning when digital assets were first launched. Could you share with us, Elizabeth, and share with the audience, what is the SFC's future direction of travel for the virtual asset space in Hong Kong? And what's the SFC's plan, and how will it affect the entire digital asset industry in Hong Kong? Over to you. What's the SFC's plan?
Thanks. Well, the most imminent work that we're doing right now is that we have been working closely with the government to introduce amendments to the anti-money laundering ordinance in Hong Kong. So these amendments were actually gazetted last Friday in the Government Gazette, and the government will be introducing this bill, this amendment bill, into LegCo in July for the first and second reading. So what does this bill actually do? It introduces a new licensing regime for virtual asset exchanges, which trade non-security tokens in Hong Kong. So this new bill, this new regime, will be working hand in hand with our existing opt-in regime, whereby for exchanges that trade security tokens, they will continue to be regulated by the SFC under the SFO. And for exchanges that are that only trade non-security tokens, they'll be regulated under the AMLO. So, which means that once this new regime commences, then the SFC will be regulating all virtual asset exchanges in Hong Kong, irrespective of whether they trade security or non-security tokens. Now, under this regime, we have only introduced the licensing framework under the ordinance. But for the regulatory requirements, we will actually be imposing them through codes and guidelines, and which we will be conducting a consultation on later this year. We expect that the regulatory requirements that we will be imposing will be very similar or actually the same as the existing regime, so that there is no regulatory arbitrage between exchanges that are licensed under our SFO and exchanges that are licensed under AMLO. And again, we will be imposing requirements such as safe custody of client assets, anti-money laundering, KYC, and we would also require these exchanges to have robust internal procedures and processes. So we will be also requiring them to look at risk management angles. So this is the biggest part of the work that we're currently doing. The SFC is also monitoring. So sorry,
Elizabeth, this will catch anybody selling and buying digital assets in Hong Kong, or any company that wishes to sell or buy digital assets on behalf of clients in Hong Kong.
This will apply to all virtual asset exchanges. So if you do the buying and selling through an exchange, we are regulating the activity of operating the exchange. So we will be we will be regulating the operators to ensure that they create a fair marketplace for clients to purchase or to sell virtual assets. Right, okay. And then the next thing that the SFC is looking at is actually the decentralized finance space. So we are closely monitoring developments in this space. And because as with other regulators over the world, we are really looking hard as to where we can attach our regulatory hook to actually regulate this industry, because currently it seems like there is no apparent legal person or entity that is in charge for decentralized finance. So this is actually the international focus, and we are working with other standard setting bodies to see how we can reach a consensus internationally as to how to regulate the space. Now, finally, one of the key priorities of the SFC is international cooperation, because virtual assets and the whole space is quite cross-border and borderless. So we do need to be able to cooperate with other regulators over the world in order to have a coordinated approach to regulating this industry. So this is a key priority, I think, for the SFC and also probably for other regulators around the world, to ensure that we have a coordinated approach to regulation to prevent regulatory arbitrage between jurisdictions, which may harm investors. So these are the main things that the SFC is looking at. So
that's a lot of work coming up.
That's right. So what about you, Angelina? How do you think the crypto space will be developing in the coming years?
I think the crypto space now is moving in from just being a very niche product to actually going into major investment portfolios as an asset class. If we can survive this crypto winter, it will only make this asset even stronger. And you're seeing certain large institutional investors consider putting it into mandatory provident funds or retirement funds, as well as new asset classes coming out in terms of funds management products that are out there that actually protect investors, but also give them the upside of being able to be invested in this industry. So the other exciting part is you're seeing a lot of infrastructure being built in terms of exchanges that run 24/7, 365 days a year, but you're also seeing connecting infrastructures that move digital assets back and forth in a very, very safe manner. So you're seeing the evolution of a new asset class, which will then have a knock-on effect on traditional financial services. So you've just seen one of the major international exchange groups buy a tokenization platform. So you're seeing how even traditional exchanges are thinking, how can we go to the next step and jump to improve our infrastructures and improve our services? So what I can only see more is with the advent of CBDC, central banking digital currency, was also born out of the design of digital assets. So with that launch also, you're going to see more and more virtual assets actually being accepted. And the whole way that we treat the value and storage of value is going to be changing. So it's really, truly a very exciting time. If I had a wish list, I think, Elizabeth, if the SFC could help the industry in getting insurance, if they get licensed, getting bank accounts and getting HKMA to work with the SFC on digital asset firms that are licensed or about to be licensed, I think that will be very, very important and help the industry to go. Because still, we haven't moved into CBDC yet, so we still have the good old Hong Kong dollar or the US dollar. So we still need to deposit that to actually help our customers. So if I could have a wish list, that would be very, very helpful. And then, of course, the education of the market and making sure that people know about these rules and regulations and marketing them. That would be also my wish list, which is what we're trying to do here too. So those would be some of the things that I'm really, really excited about and seeing. And the SFC is already going to do. So we can start on that wish list immediately. So
Rest assured, we actually do maintain a very, very close dialogue with HKMA, especially on the virtual asset space. And actually, I think in relation to bank accounts and all that, they did issue a circular earlier this year, around the same time as the joint circular. And I think we will continue to speak with them on various issues that we see in the industry.
Please, that would be great.
Right. Maybe we should change the topic a little. I know today's discussion also includes a topic on women in crypto. So you, Angelina, being a woman in crypto and actually the CEO of Stratford Finance, how would you describe your path to success in this industry so far?
I think holding true to your values of doing the right thing and helping the industry and helping market participants comply, as well as trying to encourage young women and girls to move into the tech area are things that I am very passionate about. As the vice chair of the Women's Foundation, we have a number of programs like Girls Go Tech. We have a lot of work worked with women on boards. And I think truly, as we have more women move into technology, hopefully what we'll get is more diverse views and hopefully better decision-making, because if you have men and women working together, that's very, very much more of a cooperation. And I mean, that's basically the world. And we will get good coverage in terms of decision-making and hopefully come up with better solutions. So I really, really encourage young women and executive women to actually look into the field of digital assets. It is a truly exciting area and a new part of financial services. As a part of this whole JESSICA Crypto Women Trailblazers, we hope to show that there are serious women in financial services that are moving into digital assets. And you saw from that Trailblazers campaign, we had Cynthia Wu, we had Leslie Lam, and Natalie and Cici, all who are actually senior women in financial services. Yourself in financial services, Julia Leung, the CEO and Deputy CEO of the SFC, all as great inspire women into our industry. So what about you now, Elizabeth? You're juggling work. You've got two beautiful young girls, and you've got, I think, a fabulous husband, because I've known him for so many years. How do you juggle all of this? And do you think there's a gender gap or obstacles for women to move into this industry?
Well, I can't say I'm fully immersed in the crypto space. I still work for a regulator rather than the actual industry. So if you ask me from an SFC perspective, I have to give credit to the SFC. We have a women's network, and my team, my fintech team, is predominantly female. And of course, as you said, we're overseen by our one and only Deputy CEO, Ms. Julia Leung. So we're all females over here. So I think from a gender equality perspective, we're doing quite well in the SFC. We have we're supporting women in leadership roles quite well, I think. A lot of our rather senior executives are also women. So from the SFC perspective, I think that's that. In terms of how I balance work and family life, I think as with many other working mothers, we try to fit everything. We run our errands during lunch times. We might do them when we've just sent our kids to art class or ballet class. And so that's what we try to do, to squeeze all the time that we have. And I actually need to confess that I don't think I've got the balance right. I still think I work a bit too much. I feel I neglect my kids quite often. And I do also have the occasional, I keep looking at my iPhone and all that. So But then, and also in terms of schoolwork, I tend to rely on teachers too. So they tell me that my daughter hasn't been handing in homework, for example, and that's when I first find out. So, but then I do feel that I was raised that way. In the long run, I think that maybe my rather hands-off way of handling them may actually help them to be a bit more independent. So it feels like a big experiment to me right now, but then I hope that it does turn out to be okay.
That's great.
Yeah. So for Angelina, you know, you do so much community work. You have so much power and you also do a lot of charity work. And on the other hand, you have such a demanding job, and you even study. So congratulations again on graduating from Harvard recently. So how do you balance it all?
Horribly. Basically, I work during the day and get off or try to get off by about 7 o'clock at night. Then I would study from roughly 8 o'clock in the evening till about 2 in the morning. I roughly sleep about 3 to 4 hours a day. So that was how I juggled my life. So I'm so excited that I can actually sleep now. 10 o'clock to 6 in the morning. And I think sleep is very, very important. But I have a really good network of friends, and you have to rely on people in your family as well as your friends in terms of support. I had an amazing ex-colleague of ours that would send me notes. Angelina, have you actually remembered to study? Have you finished your paper yet? So that was really a part of that network of support that was there. But it really shows that you really need to be very disciplined in terms of if you're juggling various things. And I have a very big passion for charity. And I think Women's Foundation, my work with the Ebenezer School of the Blind, my work with Hong Kong government is very, very important to me. So it's juggling that with the demands of work, of making sure that we meet business requirements and bringing in business are all also very important. So women have so many things to juggle in relation, as do men, in relation to home and family life. And I think it becomes very important that you need to be very organized. You need to plan your day. It helps if you have a really good assistant, which I do. So those are some of the things that I do. I fortunately don't have children, so I'm just going to adopt yours and Jessica's kids. So I will live vicariously as a mom through yours and her kids. So that's the other way that I sort of get my hopefully inspire women that you can do this, you can get into tech, it's not difficult. And it's a great achievement now that within the SFC, there are many senior women there, as well as HKEX and many, many government bodies. And we hope to see that same thing happen in the digital assets industry, where it's more women that are actually in senior roles growing into this area. So this is something that I know the SFC issues because everybody is, a lot of people being recruited out of the SFC. So if you're hiring people, you should also tell digital asset natives that maybe coming into the SFC would be an opportunity also to learn about regulation and to learn about that type of thing. So that's another area of growth and regulation and compliance to be in. So
yeah, I totally agree because yeah, I think we do need to maintain a more open dialogue with the industry. I know that they probably previously never really had any feel of regulations. So it's the first time. So we understand that we need to work on the communication to make sure that both of us understand each other quite well, as they understand what regulations we want to see, and want them to comply with, and they understand where we're coming from. So.
Well, hopefully, as we put out, as the Gazette has come out, People should also be looking at the original consultation paper that came out in 2021 to understand more about what you were talking about. That's available also on the SFC website. The Gazette is available on the Laws of Hong Kong gazetted version. You can see the AMLRO legislation was just gazetted last week. And for all the codes of conduct and things in terms of guidance for digital asset players, you can see them all on the SFC website. It's all free, it's all out there. And you'll be seeing more training through, I'm putting a plug in for the Hong Kong Securities Institute. You'll see more training in that area. And I'm sure there will be a lot more service providers that will be giving training in this area. So it's definitely going to be more resources out there for people to learn about digital assets. So we now are drawing to an area where we have to go into our questions and answers, and we'd like to open up the floor to questions to Elizabeth or myself. If anybody has them, Kelvin's going to be telling us about the questions.
Yes, I am here. Thank you, Angelina, and thank you, Elizabeth, for sharing today. Let's start with a questions from Jessica. When it comes to attracting talents to the regulated virtual asset space, what are the plans from the regulators in terms of education and training of existing and new market practitioners? Basically, she would like to know how are we going to attract more women and talents into this crypto area? Let's start with something.
Right. The SFC actually does work with the government and other organizations like Cyberport. There's various incentive schemes that have been introduced to promote talent, to provide subsidies to talent. So we provide a lot of input, and we also support these initiatives. And for example, we also participate in deciding what kind of knowledge that the industry may need to have. So then we work on frameworks, for example, on qualification standards and all that. So we have been in the background. We very rarely step out in front, but we do support a lot of these initiatives that are going around. And I think a lot of these can be found through Invest Hong Kong or the government's website, Cyberport or Science Park. So I think the industry could also look into those and see if there are any incentives or subsidy schemes that they can make use of to attract talent and to retain talent or to build up talent in Hong Kong.
And just putting in a plug again, the SFC and Hong Kong Exchanges and Clearing very early on decided to invest and form the Hong Kong Securities Institute, which is a non-for-profit training center to improve the standards and increase the standards for market participants in the financial services industry. I should disclose that I'm a director of it. We are committed to actually help market participants get up to speed in all areas of training. And we offer training to market participants anywhere from trading in securities all the way to OTC derivatives to new products such as virtual assets. And we'll be coming up with a training program as well as a licensing program, which we hope to work with the SFC on in terms of getting responsible officers and licensed representatives ready for the new regime. So I don't know because we're still in the process, but there will be more and more training offered in the virtual assets industry. And hopefully women will take part in this as well as men. And you're going to see, as always, because Hong Kong is so resourceful, you're going to see a lot of service providers that offer training to legal or accounting executives, more training in those areas too. Because accountants need to get up to speed, lawyers need to get up to speed, as well as service providers. So all of those legal to Next question.
Okay.
wait.
Yeah. Next question. Question from the audience. The SFC also posted a press release on NFTs. Since NFTs require a gas fee, crypto, are they indirectly not encouraged for retail? The press release also talked about SFC's possible jurisdiction on fungible NFTs. Does, for example, one asset, multiple owners fall under this criteria?
Right. Actually, our press release, as I previously mentioned, was mainly to warn investors. We're not discouraging or encouraging investors, retail investors especially, on whether they should be participating in this NFT space. But we are just merely warning investors that there are associated risks with NFTs, especially the secondary markets may be illiquid and very volatile as well. So that was one of the main purposes of the press release. The other purpose of the press release was to remind the industry, because we noted recent developments where we saw fractionalized NFTs or fungible NFTs, which were structured to be more like securities or collective investment schemes. So we wanted to remind industry that they should be careful in designing their NFTs. If they do resemble financial assets and they actually amount to collective investment schemes, for example, then securities laws would apply. But we're not saying that all NFTs, all fractionalized are definitely securities, for example. I think it still depends on each terms and conditions of each specific NFT. So if the industry is not very clear about the NFT that they're issuing, then they should be seeking professional advice.
Got it.
Okay. Another question. As virtual asset is digital, basically it can be traded from all parts of the world. So what kinds of trade exchange are under the supervision of SFC? As a Hong Kong regulatory body, any overseas investor trade virtual security issued by BVI registered company? So how does this work? Right.
Under the new licensing regime that we're introducing under the MLO, we, as with our powers under the SFO, where the exchange is actually operating a business in Hong Kong, then it will require to be licensed. So if it's operating the exchange business in Hong Kong, we have enough evidence to show that it's really operating in Hong Kong, then they will be required to get a license. We also, as with the SFO, we also make it an offense to actively market the services of an exchange to Hong Kong investors if you do not have a license. So if you're overseas but you actively market your services to Hong Kong investors going forward, this will also be an offense under the MLO. So it's quite clear that where you actually target Hong Kong investors with your services, or you actually provide them in Hong Kong, then you will be required to be licensed.
Okay, following up on the licensing question, Elizabeth, you just mentioned about licensing. Could you share more about the timeline about it?
Right. Well, in terms of under the new regime, we will need to be issuing the regulatory requirements for public consultations. So that will take quite some time. Currently, the bill is set to commence on the 1st of March, 2023. And under the bill, there is a transitional arrangement so that for exchanges that are actually operating in Hong Kong already, they have a 9-month time period to submit their application to Hong Kong to the SFC for a license to operate in Hong Kong, and we will start to process the licensing applications once we receive them. But then, obviously, as with all licensing applications, it really depends on the quality of the submissions and also the technical aspects of the submission. So, because so far we've received quite a few virtual asset exchange applications, which are currently in the pipeline. And I have to say that each exchange so far adopts quite different kinds of custody arrangements or technical solutions behind it. So we do have to look at these arrangements in detail. And so it will take a bit of time. And so under the new law, we've also implemented a deeming provision, whereby as long as operators of exchanges submit their applications within 9 months, and on the 12th month of the commencement of the bill, which is the 1st of March 2024, then they can be deemed to be licensed before we actually approve the actual license. So that gives us a bit more time to process the applications, and while allowing existing exchanges to continue to operate and provide to conduct their business in Hong Kong.
Okay, another following up questions. If a licensed securities broker want to do brokerage for their clients via the licensed exchange, does it need to get additional license or approval from the SFC?
Right. In relation to all types of virtual asset activities, we currently require our intermediaries to notify us before they start engaging in these activities. So yes, if a broker, a securities brokerage, would like to provide dealing services in virtual assets, then they would need to first notify us. And then in the joint circular that we issued, we in an appendix at the back, we also prescribe the terms and conditions that we would be imposing on the license of securities brokerages if they engage in virtual asset dealing services. So yes, they definitely need to find us. And we do have specific requirements, although we adopt the same business, same rules approach, but we have certain requirements that have been adapted to address specific risks associated with virtual assets. So these specific requirements will be imposed on the license of the securities brokerage before they can start engaging and providing such services.
Okay. The joint circular, sorry, Angela, go ahead.
I just follow on. So for fund managers that are also in traditional fund management products, they, if they wish to go into digital assets, they also have to go through a process called the fund uplift, which is a part of a process that you would apply to the SFC. If they also wish to do services ancillary in terms of taking digital asset deposits and things like that, do they also need to be licensed under this new AMLO regime? Or will their existing uplifted fund management license cover that? I don't know if I'm clear or not.
For fund managers, we already introduced a framework for them back in 2018. So what happens is that if a fund manager intends to directly invest in virtual assets for more than 10% of the portfolio of its fund, then they will need to first notify the SFC. And then we would look at their business plan, and then we would impose, requirements on their license to govern their conduct when they provide fund management services in relation to virtual assets as underlying. So what we do is that we will impose licensing conditions on their license, and but under the new AMLO, this regime remains the same, because for AMLO, mainly we only currently regulate virtual asset exchanges. So fund managers do not currently fall under the AMLO. We are just regulating virtual asset exchanges that provide trading in non-security tokens under the AMLO. So the two regimes are quite separate, actually.
Okay, another one. The joint circular issued by SFA and HKMA earlier only state the securities firm can only sell the products to professional investors. How about the retail customers? Are the selling activities to retail customers under-regulated?
Right. Currently in the circular, we actually do provide a small channel, a limited suite of products that can actually be bought by retail investors in Hong Kong. So as I said just now, this limited suite of products are exchange-traded derivative products that meet certain requirements. For example, they need to be traded on specified exchanges, and if there are fund products, then they need to be approved in designated jurisdictions for offering to retail investors. So if those products meet those requirements, then the distribution in Hong Kong, we would not impose the professional investor only restriction to it, which means that it could be made available to retail investors.
Okay. We do have quite a lot of questions today. I just want to let everyone know that should we not be able to answer all the questions today, because we have about a dozen plus questions, all questions will be directed back to Elizabeth later, and we will be posting questions and answers from them on our website, including this recording later on this week. So please bear with us. There are way too many questions for us to ask and answer right now. Let's go with two more questions.
I'm glad people are asking questions, and it's great to see that people are very excited about this. So sorry.
Yeah. Before we have to close this, I have two more questions with me right now. It seems that the SFC takes a long time to approve virtual assets fund. How can the process be expedited, make it quicker?
Right. First of all, I'd want to clarify a big point is that the SFC does not regulate virtual asset funds. We only regulate the fund manager. So we regulate the fund manager's conduct to make sure that they properly manage the fund, manage it in accordance with the investment mandate that they set out in their PPM, for example, and that they adopt proper liquidity management, risk management, policies and procedures so that the fund can meet the requirements of the investors, and that they also ensure the safe custody of assets in the fund. So we regulate the fund manager and not the fund itself. As for our processing time, as I previously mentioned, it really depends on the quality of submissions that we receive, the clarity of submissions. So I think this is a process that the SFC and the industry needs to work hand in hand together, because as I said, I understand that the virtual asset space for a lot of people working in this area, a lot of them have not actually understood, or let's say they haven't really come face to face with regulations before. They don't quite understand what we look at for compliance. So I think it's a communication process between the SFC and the applicants. And through that process, we try to smooth out everything and to make industry understand what we're looking for. On the other hand, we also try to understand what the business model that industry is wants to do. So I think it's getting smoother, and I think we do try to process applications as fast as possible, but then again, it really depends on the quality of submission. So I would ask industry to do try their best to hand in quite a complete application to us from the start.
Okay.
One of the things that might be helpful is we put together a do's and don'ts and really in the application, and maybe that's something that we can help the industry if we do a training course on that for applications, so that it will make your life easier as well as the applicants easier. That's what we used to do for fund management when we were still applying. So sorry about that. Just to add in. Kelvin, last question.
Yeah, last question. Will the OCT crypto service be regulated under the Hong Kong regime as per AMLO and SFO? If yes, which regulation should we follow? Will SFC regulate physical exchanges too?
Right, now, under the AMLO for OTC virtual asset trading, or dealing in virtual assets, under the AMLO, it's not currently an activity that is governed by the AMLO. However, under the SFC's current opt-in regime, and going forward, since we will be imposing the same regulatory requirements under the AMLO, we do allow licensed virtual asset exchanges to also conduct OTC trades for the clients. So in that sense, OTC dealing in virtual assets would be regulated by the SFC if it is conducted by virtual asset exchange operators. So that part of the OTC market is governed. Going forward, actually, under the AMLO right now, in doing the amendments, the government actually left flexibility in order for them to add new virtual asset services to the ordinance, so that going forward, if the government identifies certain virtual asset activities that are quite prevalent and that warrant regulation, then they can easily add that service to the ordinance, and then they could decide on who should be the actual regulator for those activities. So currently for OTC, it's regulated by the SFC if it's done by SFC licensed virtual asset exchanges. But going forward, this flexibility to regulate is also provided in the AMLO.
So Kelvin and Elizabeth, we're running short of time. I'm told that we have a few minutes left. Elizabeth, what would your last word be? And let's give you your last words in terms of just for your views about the digital asset industry. And then I'll say my last words. How about that?
Sure. I think we're getting there. I think over the years, we've been communicating with industry. I think we're starting to understand each other quite well now. And I do hope that the industry will really take a hard look at our comprehensive regime, which has been in place, which actually spells out things in detail, unlike other jurisdictions, and really provides regulatory certainty and clarity. And I hope that they will find that actually maybe coming to Hong Kong is a good idea.
Great. And for me, my last words are thank you so much, Elizabeth, for doing this. I think this was a great way to actually debut this in a manner where we can actually reach a lot of people. So thank you so much for doing this fireside chat with me. I know that I always have fun doing this with you. So I look forward to doing more and training more. I'd like to thank the Jess Network. Happy anniversary. And thank you so much for actually providing this platform so that we can get the message out there that Hong Kong is and will remain an amazing financial center and hopefully the digital asset center of choice for market participants. And we only look forward now to growing this and making this even a bigger asset class. So without further ado, thank you today. And thank you all the participants for being so patient. Your questions will be answered and we'll make sure that that gets out with the help of the SFC and Elizabeth and her team. Thank you, Elizabeth. Thank you, SFC team, and look forward to seeing you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Angelina. Thank you, Elizabeth. A few more words because we do have another 2 sections going on today. The next section will be digital marketing with head of marketing from Google, Nancy Ding, at 10:30. And then at 11:30, we'll be having our section with Women in Tech, APAC, Belinda, of course, Jessica herself, and the Women's Foundation, Lisa. So everybody, please stay tuned and we will see you soon in the next section. Thank you again, Angelina. Thank you again, Elizabeth. Thank you, everybody. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.